listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 284. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me today is Dan Bayer.
Hello, everybody.
And it's a spooky episode, scary episode.
We get Christmas in July, so we have Halloween in April.
There you go.
I
I hate, by the way, not to go on like a tangent on stuff, but the Christmas in July people, get a life.
Please.
Get a fucking life.
Let us enjoy summer while we have it.
Yeah,
okay?
like go outside, go to the pool. Like the Christmas in July people, just that's not even what the meaning of that holiday is all about.
No.
And they're not getting it. And yet, yeah, anyway, sorry, not to be cranky at the start of this episode, but just go watch a movie in the summer and eat a popsicle. Don't Coco and Santa don't exist. Anyway, we're here to talk about Sinners, which is the newest film from Ryan Coogler that's dropped this weekend. And we're here to talk about our favorite horror films or the best horror films of the century so far. And I'm really excited to talk about that with you, Dan. I know you're a big fan of horror movies, genre films, and this weekend has given us maybe the best film of the year so far. That's at least what a lot of people have been saying. It's Sinners from Ryan Coogler, starring Michael B. Jordan, and two Michael B. Jordans. We didn't just get one this go around. We got two of them. A gothic Southern vampire musical in a lot of ways. Yes. And it is one of the most original films that we've gotten so far this decade. In terms of big budget blockbusters, it's got a big price tag along with it, a lot of expectations. A lot of people at Warner Brothers hoping and praying to God it makes a ton of money. And yet the critical wave of this has been extraordinary. I saw that it also got an A CinemaScore, which is one of I think the first horror film of the decade so far to get a CinemaScore, which is, I believe, apparently, if not one of them. And it is the highest grossing original film since Jordan Peele's Nope. And that's of the decade, which is crazy. A lot of people have been loving this, been proclaiming it a 5-star masterpiece. A lot to chew on with Ryan Coogler, who is a director that I'm curious what your thoughts on him as a director. I feel like he's going down the path which we see a lot of independent directors go down, Dan, which is make a film and then get kind of, molded into the studio. And now he's got the cachet to cash in a blank check. And so I'm curious what you think about Ryan Coogler, but then also your thoughts on his latest film, Sinners.
So Ryan Coogler is not one of my favorite filmmakers or anything, but I can't deny that he hasn't been on a hot streak, especially lately. I mean, the Creed movies, the Black Panther movies, these are some of the best major studio blockbusters that we've gotten all century so far in the 2000s. They're really kind of ideal cross sections of art and commerce in ways that a lot of people get wrong or somehow manage to fuck up, even when they have all the benefits that Coogler has had on his side in terms of the funding that he's been able to get for some of these movies and the talent involved. But yeah, those are really good movies that are just not necessarily my thing, but I can appreciate that they're done really, really well. And with Sinners, I mean, look, the man is fucking cooking in this movie, especially for the first half. I purposely kept myself as in the dark about this movie for as long as I could. I saw the trailer, obviously the first trailer that came out and the first teaser, but then kind of in the recent wave of, critical reactions, I tried to filter that out as much as I could because I knew I wouldn't be able to get to see it. I only just saw it literally right before we sat down to record this. So it's very fresh in my mind. And there is just something about seeing this movie in a full house, real IMAX theater with lots of people who are really into what is happening on screen. And especially for the first half of this, it's magical. The way that Coogler and all the artisans that worked on this movie set up this world of Mississippi, early 1930s, and these characters, and we just soak in it. We marinate in it for the first like two acts of this movie. It's not what you would generally expect from a big budget horror movie from a major studio. And yet, I think that is by far the best part of this movie. I think that once the vampires show up and we start playing in that little genre sandbox, I think the movie starts to lose something for me. It doesn't. It doesn't go as full tilt boogie into the horror vampires violence that as I would like. But man, everything that comes before, everything, literally everything until those vampires show up outside the door of that house. And even after that, it's all so good. It's also striking. The cinematography, the use of fire and candlelight in this is really incredible. Even though like, and I saw this on IMAX 70 millimeter projection, like film projection at AMC Lincoln Square, there was some issues, and I don't know if it's the projection, but I've heard other people have the same complaint where in
Heard the
IMAX, a lot of the faces are very dark
yeah.
to watch. And I don't know if that's a projection thing or something that is often the calibration when they're trying to film between digital and film at the same time. I don't know. But that was like the only nitpick that I had with this movie on a technical level. It's so well done, but there is that one sequence, or I guess that one shot smack dab in the middle of this movie that I know everyone has been talking about, and all you have to do is say that one shot, and you know what the person is talking about. That is so goddamn good, and one of the best things that I have seen in the cinema all year, like bar none. Nothing has come close to that sequence. I wish that everything else in this was working at the same level that sequence was working at for me, where just everything, the artistry of the technical aspects of filmmaking, the artistry of Coogler's mind to conceive of this and film it in one shot like this. The score by Ludwig Göransson, who is just turning out masterpiece after masterpiece of movie scores in his career. It's insane. The the performances, everything about that sequence is just I'm just sitting here and like thinking back on it and like kind of going into this reverie in my mind because it's so good and what it's showing, how it's mashing all these time periods together, mashing all these different musical genres together and creating this tapestry of culture and history and art that is so beautiful and says more in one shot than some entire films do. And I wish that the whole movie was working on that high a level, but that's probably too high for just about anyone to sustain for feature length. And I admit when it goes into full on horror show at the end, it didn't hit as hard for me as I wanted. But there is something about watching Michael B. Jordan just take a machine gun to a white Klan member and hearing the rest of the audience burst into applause that you just don't get with other films. And you know what? I'll take the slight pacing issues and my wish for this to hit a bit harder in that third act for that emotional high because it's worth it.
I I think that Coogler has all the promise in the world of being one of the great directors working today. And I go back to when I first saw Fruitvale many years ago in an independent theater here in San Antonio, and was kind of blown away as a debut, blown away by Michael B. Jordan's performance.
Yeah, it's good
And
stuff.
then thinking, we talked about this a little bit on the 2015 retrospective episode recently, where I thought Creed was a dumb, stupid ass idea. Like on paper, it just sounded like one of those press releases, Dan, where we're like, wait, that movie's going to exist and they're going to do that. And, it's a little bit like the 21 Jump Street of like, they're going to do what? And then it works out. And then we look like a bunch of fools, and then he did Black Panther, and that's one of the best MCU movies, period. And it's the only MCU movie to get nominated for Best Picture. And then I do think that his producing credit and guidance on something like Judas and the Black Messiah is very apparent. And he's starting to kind of do a lot of what Jordan Peele has been doing over the last couple of years, whereas he's attaching himself, his brand, his style to films to get them made and helping move that forward. And then Wakanda Forever happens. Kind of not really, obviously his fault. I think that movie is a mess. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that like that is a movie is not really the movie he ever probably wanted to make, because Chadwick Boseman's death caused them to go in an entirely complete direction. It's very much, honestly, a lot like a friend of his, Christopher Nolan, in how Heath Ledger's death affected The Dark Knight Rises and had to completely shift what that movie was going to be. And we'll never know what that other film was going to be or the idea of replacing that, because it's a generational star in a career defining role. And so, but the movie still made a ton of money. And
if anyone has earned, if any director of the past 5-10 years has earned a blank check, it's Ryan Coogler.
He has exceeded all expectations and made cultural events. That is what the Black Panther films and even Creed, because like he built like the 2 Creed sequels. We have 2 Creed sequels. We shouldn't even have a Creed movie, let alone 2 Creed sequels.
No.
Michael B. Jordan is behind the camera and trusted to do so. He is making a Thomas Crown Affair remake?
Yes, yeah.
And which, give me that movie, please. But he doesn't get to step behind the camera if it's not for Coogler. He has publicly stated that he is indebted to this man, and rightfully so, because he gets the best out of him. And B. Jordan gets the best out of his director by being that leading man presence. They are the new Denzel Spike. They are the new Scorsese De Niro. However you want to like chop it up, that's what they are. And they pretty much do not work, without the other when it comes to Coogler's films. So when we hear for a while that this is going to be his next film set in the South, this sort of Southern Gothic vampire movie, it really bothered me, because not because of what he was doing. The marketing of this movie was hiding it, and hiding a lot of what even this movie is. And that I even think the first trailer does a lot of that. And I think Warner Brothers, who is in a massive identity crisis, didn't want to tell audiences that this is a vampire movie for some reason. I don't know why. Because horror is king right now. We're talking about this genre as a whole on this episode over the last 25 years. Its evolution from the 2000s to now. Horror is one of the most bankable box office genres we have currently. These movies make a ton of money and they're relatively cheap for the most part. And they have seeped into the consciousness. Like, a movie like Nosferatu and a movie like The Substance last year prove that even these small to mid budget films can find an audience at any point of the year. And this movie is been hailed as one of the best movies of the year. Completely original, completely authentic. I completely agree with that. I think that not since Nope have we had such a bold film that is not based on existing IP come from a studio and allow. It's very rare to see a director of color be given this amount of money. It's very rare at all. And watching this film, I was elevated at times of just being able to see a bold, original Ryan Coogler film. And I hadn't felt like I'd seen a full visionary Ryan Coogler movie since Fruitvale Station. And he's even admitted that. He admitted that in the Deadline interview that Creed and the Black Panther movies, those are studio films. They give a ton of notes. They're IP driven. Rocky is not his. You know what I mean? Black Panther and Black Panther 2 are to fit an overall Marvel storyline. So the fact that the deal that he made to get his own IP back, which no, folks, it's not the end. It's not the end of cinema. It's not going to be the end of the studios. I've already heard all that. Tarantino did the same thing for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If anything, it's smart, and it shows that he's that kind of filmmaker. He's on that. He's getting on that level of a name brand. He is on the level of Jordan Peele, and I think that this is a movie that is weirdly speaking in concert with something like Nope, where it is a director throwing everything that they have at the kitchen sink with these resources that they have. And I think Nope lands a lot more and has a much more, for me, I think that movie is speaking more about the studio system and how to make money. It's got much more of a commentary there. This has, and obviously racial commentary, as well as it's less of a horror film, more of a sci-fi film. There's so much going on in Nope, layers and layers and layers upon that. And that, to me, is one of the best films of the decade so far. This is one of the best films of the year, and a movie that, for me, Dan, as I was watching it, I was thinking about every shot, every decision. I was seeing every decision. I thought it was wonderful. I thought they were different and unlike anything we've seen in a while. And then the best thing about a movie like Sinners is not even just the theatrical experience and seeing it in whatever format you can see it this in, even though you should see it in the biggest format and on film, even though it should be more available for other people outside of like the 12 theaters in the country that have this, which is really crazy because like we had all this for Oppenheimer, but we don't have all this for Sinners, right? So we're still, Hollywood's still got a long way to go there, but it's the days after you see this movie and the shots and the environment, the music, the tone, what he's saying, that have lingered. And that is what makes a movie great. It's not just necessarily experience. It's the lingering quality. There's only 2 films this year that have been released. There's a festival film that I can't talk about because nobody's actually seen it outside of people in 2 screenings at South by. But the 2 films this year that have lingered the most for me after being in the theater was Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag and this. And it's no coincidence that those are considered the best films of the year so far. And I think that this might be the best we've seen of Michael B. Jordan, giving this dual performance that gives life to these 2 very distinct and different characters. I think that the production design, the camera, the editing, everything about it is great. I do agree with you, Dan. I do think that the cinematography is at times a little too dark. that is a problem. It's the same cinematographer that did Black Panther, Wakanda Forever with him. And I thought that in that film, you couldn't see faces or you couldn't see certain things specifically in the IMAX. So I did not see, I saw this in just a regular, regular screening. I did not see this in IMAX yet. And I'm kind of worried about seeing it in IMAX, even though I really want to see it in IMAX because of all the complaints that I've heard. But maybe those are adjustments that can be made. I think that it's one of the most fascinating genre films that we've had in a while. And I do agree with you. I think that it's not perfect, but to quote Van Latham, who was on the Big Picture podcast, the things that make it imperfect, or the imperfections rather, are what make the film great. It's that the idea of somebody being able to do this. And it's not one of those films, though, that I also sit there and go, well, I'm glad it exists, but it's not for me. It's a movie that I'm glad it exists, and it's very much for me. It's talking about so many things. It's talking about race. It's talking about ancestry. It's talking about our relationship to music and who gets to own that and that ownership and how that's built inside one another. Where that fire from an artist is generational. It's ancestral. And maybe that's Coogler speaking a little bit about himself. Maybe that's speaking about artists that inspire him. I feel so many inspirations for his work in this movie. I was feeling a movie like Devil in the Blue Dress. I was thinking of Spike's films. I was he talked about Dust Till Dawn, Tarantino. Don't Look Now was an inspiration that he said that was very important to him in making this, about a sort of a simple, ordinary film that then is about human relationships that then divulges into a horror film by the end. Is very psychological and built in the world. And I kind of really dug the shit out of it. I don't think it's like the greatest thing in the world, like some people have. Like I'm not putting the M word on it. Like, people want to put the masterpiece on it, but I feel like it's a weird movie for me personally, because I don't want to do that, but yet I feel so strongly about defending the shit out of it. Mm-hmm. And so that does mean that I do love it in a way for both what it is saying and its existence. And if these movies won't come from Warner Brothers anytime soon, I'm freaking glad as hell that it came now. Sinners rules in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I think that there's been a bit of overpraise. I think this the movies way from a lot of critics, but this happens, and especially like when we've been so starved for not that Q1 2025 has been terrible.
No.
But there has not been really meaty stuff to chew on. There's been a lot of good light B movie stuff, popcorn, companion drop, very fun movies.
Yeah.
But there's nothing that you've really gotten to chew on for real cinephiles, except Black Bag and some of the international feature hangovers from last year. And there's so much to chew on with
this. Is where I was at last year with Dune, where it's other movies are going to come, folks, and we don't have to just best movie of the year right here. You can do that, but there's also 8 more months still to come, and there's all these movies coming from Cannes and all the festivals that people will then, it's an easy quote. But if I would be shocked if this wasn't in and around maybe the 20 best films I've seen this year.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if a lot of other films this year from this type of level, the studio films, if you look at the slate, I don't know if anything's going to come out that rivals its, I don't think originality is the word. I think authenticity, is the right word. And Van Latham said that again, and I want to give him credit for that, because I think he's absolutely right. The word original, we've seen smatterings of films like this before. This isn't brand new territory. but
Yeah.
it's authentic because it's coming from an auteur that has never been able to artistically speak on a film like this before and use his voice. And it feels so authentic to a kind of like a reimagining or reintroducing the world to what a Ryan Coogler movie can be if you allow him to not be stuck in an IP film for a while. For
Yeah.
like he's been stuck there for since 2018. Like that's 7
Yeah.
years
The,
since in Marvel Land, or probably like 8 or 9, considering he had to like
mhm.
make the film, and then
Yeah.
it's not even Creed. So we're talking about 11, 12 years making
Yeah, an
movies
easy
that
decade. Yeah.
other people want to make. Now he made a ton of money, and now he's cashing that in, and rightfully, like when you hear him talk about it, such a like you can't help but not root for the guy because
Yeah.
he's so so genuine about cinema and speaking about like the biggest thing I've seen gone viral in the last 2 weeks on online was him breaking down the screening and how to see it from the Kodak thing.
It
Like,
is
you know what I mean?
absolutely wild that that went as viral as it did, but I fucking love it.
But that
It's
speaks to like
yeah.
that speaks to people's attention to want to see it, the need to
Mhm.
see movies like this and it be an event. Like this
Yes.
is an event. And
People
we
care about this shit. They do. It is a way to bring people back to theaters. And the fact that Hollywood has not capitalized on it, that movie theaters have not capitalized on it, it's disappointing
it
in
is
all the ways
disappointing.
you expect from Hollywood.
But the movie itself, it is honestly like we, we announced recently that we're for the next series starting next week, we're going to do Peter Jackson. And I was doing my research and watching like Lord of the Rings and some of these other films.
This is for the Director
Director
Watch
Watch.
podcast.
Way to
that
plug
you can
my own
listen
stuff.
to every week with Ryan McQuade and Jay Ledbetter of the AwardsWatch team and various special guests.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Mhm.
But I was thinking about when I was watching Lord of the Rings about like the patience that Jackson tells a story there, which is this giant fantasy film that most audiences at the time hadn't read those books. Like they'll lie to you, Dan. They didn't read those books. The first time they ever saw
Certainly
most of this,
the youngest
yeah,
fans
most
who
people,
saw them in
most
the original
people.
run did not read
I'll
those
tell you
books.
this: most of those people read The Hobbit. They didn't read the rest of that shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it was like either school reading or they just like, I'm not reading those 3 books. That's a lot of fantasy. And then so a lot of people read those afterwards. So that movie has to like fully present itself, and establish this world and give you these
Mhm.
characters and do it in an authentic way. And it has to world build, and it has to make you want to be in this environment. Coogler does that in this film
Yeah.
easily from the get-go. Walking in, something sinister is going to happen. But you're right. The journey to get to the final act, to the sort of vampire, blood-soaked, bullets flying, people biting third act, which is wild within itself. I think once he lets it loose is great. I think the little bit of the logic or the way we get there from the build up to
Mm.
there's like a 5 or 10 minute sequence where we're setting up the rules and the rules are pretty established and then the characters kind of like fuck all the rules. And that to me is
Yeah.
like, oh, I wouldn't have
It's
gone there. But then
yeah.
but then I'm like, but that's a nitpick.
Right.
They
That's
didn't
the
get
thing is
into
like
it, and then he gets into it by the end, and
yeah.
he kind of just like puts the pedal on the gas and doesn't stop, even in the
Mhm.
mid credit and the end sequence, at the end credit sequence, and it's like, well, he fully committed. I can't fault him for fully committing to just going all the way with it,
Mhm.
and carrying the through line of the first half into the second act and
Mhm.
beyond, like. He does that, but that world building and getting to know these characters to then
Incredible.
when have emotional payoffs by the end,
Mhm.
we don't get that anymore. Like
No.
name
That's what really
blockbusters that
makes
do that. You
yeah,
know?
that's what really feels like sets this movie apart. It's what
Mhm.
makes the movie special is that first hour where like I'm sure most people who see this will be like, God, why isn't anything happening? Nothing is happening. But like it's not boring.
No.
You have that score from Goranson, which is just going ham the whole movie. You have Michael B. Jordan, who is so charismatic, and you have him twice, so you got even more of that going on. And the whole cast really is incredibly charismatic. Moonmi Masaku is one of the most watchable actors on the face of the planet right now. I will flock to anything that that woman is in. She's phenomenal. She's great here, but like she just comes on screen. Her and Lee Jun Lee, just like who else are you going to be looking at when those women are on screen? You can't look away from them.
I
And
think they're wonderful. I think Miles
yeah,
Canton
he's
as Sammy,
fantastic
who's
debut.
it's
Fantastic.
one of the best debuts. I mean, we're gonna, I know Mark
Mhm.
does a list at the for us on the website at the end of the year of breakthrough performances. This is going to be that because
On at near the top.
and it's really
Absolutely.
honestly the most important performance in the film because if you're
Mhm.
not buying into Sammy Preacher Boy's sort of storyline, his talent and everything, really doesn't matter what everything else is going on. And to your
Mhm.
point, Dan, he's part of the most important scene of the year so
Yeah.
far.
And that
And
is so something about that scene and that story that they're working with him and
mhm,
the mysticism of it. I don't think that this movie is particularly original, like on the face of it, in the way that we think of original things, even
mhm,
when we're mashing these different genres together. That's kind of been done before, but it is completely singular.
mhm,
Exactly what you said about like this really being his vision
yeah,
and just completely unfiltered. And even if like I think that taking so much time to set up this world and then having that final showdown last for like not actually very long in the runtime of the movie is like I wish that it had gone longer so that we could have more of this kind of fun. But that first half, even if I kind of want it to be shorter somehow, it's so special in what it's doing and how long it takes that I don't want to cut it. I don't want to cut anything out of it. I just want more. I think that that's my biggest issue with the film is that there's this kind of imbalance between the first half of the movie and the second half of the movie where I'm saying it's half and half, but it's not really that
I would say
intro.
it's about 2/3.
Yeah, it's two-thirds and one-third
Yeah,
much more. But that two-thirds
it's
is
so good.
just like it's A plus filmmaking in every way. And I just wish that the last third was able to bring it all together more. I think that there's a lot that Coogler is working with, and I like all of those elements.
Mhm.
But in the end, it kind of, and I just say this with like really heavy air quotes, just becomes a vampire movie by the
Mm,
end. And I don't get all as much uh resolution on the sort of thematic threads that he's working with as much as I do with the plot. Although, like, I think that the other big problem that I have with it is that Jack O'Connell's character feels a little underwritten
really?
to be the main villain
Mm,
of it. His reasoning for what he wants and why he wants it is explained, but I it's also not like not enough
see,
for me.
for me, I thought that completely worked.
Mm,
For me, I think the idea of Kugler presenting these this the villains to be, white vampires versus, and trying to
oh,
break
that
into everything. And
yeah.
I think a lot of that and him, I think that there's one particular reason that you're talking about that I don't want to get too into spoilers on why O'Connell wants to get in, right? That I think that you're right. I think that upon watching, I was like, why does he want this? But then it feeds all into the idea of appropriation within music over genres that have been this for
Hmm.
decades, and
Yeah.
the idea of, I mean, I was thinking a lot of like, I was thinking a lot of weirdly the Beatles, and I was thinking of Elvis Presley, and I was thinking of how music in the blues have been stolen for generations,
Mhm.
and yet it is the music that has defined every, not just black artist but artist,
Yeah.
and how, corporations, men in suits, smiling devils have come and knocked on the door and turned it and shaken it their own. I thought a lot also of, because I recently watched it for Kevin Jacobson's podcast. I thought about the ending of Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and I thought about that,
Mm.
tying it to Coogler and Chadwick. I thought a lot about how Levy's ultimate, demise in that film, or his downfall, is in that song is taken from him, right? And the lasting shot is of these white singers singing it, like it's going to be on public radio next
Right.
week.
Yeah.
And the idea of O'Connell literally sucking the souls out of every single person one at a time to try to get the real soul, which is this music, and why everyone collectively comes together, is, it's far more of an insidious idea, I think, than I've seen in a long time. And it weirdly was like a call and response to a lot of, I think, what Jordan Peele has been saying in his films. And
Yes.
I feel like,
Yes.
when you hear Coogler talk, and he's very, highly praising of Peele and other filmmakers, but he has not been able to fully make a movie like that without studio interference, or at least a note or two. And this is him fully being able to say the things out loud that he wants to say. And I think that it's even a little bit of saying that the avenues that I work in are completely sucking dry the vision and the soul of black voices at times, because the ones that get to fully embrace and be 100% themselves are white directors. And I think that that's definitely in there. And I don't think it's a shade at those contemporaries. I think it's a shade at the system
The system. Yeah.
and the history of how that has been. And it's through film, and that's through music, and that's through art, and that's through culture. And I think that when you start unpeeling those layers, you find a really interesting film. I think you're right. I think that honestly, that's what he's more interested in. And the vampire stuff, just ties in there to have it have a hook. And
Mhm.
I think that you're right there, Dan. I think that it does, kind of forget a little bit about being 100% a vampire film, because 100% of the film and the marketing of this movie forgets to be a vampire movie. It
I
doesn't
don't.
want to.
I don't know. I definitely got a vampire movie from the
The
short
market.
teasers that they
I
watched.
think. I
Like,
think if you, I asked people in my life, they were like, "What's the movie about?" And they saw trailers and they didn't even know. I'm like, I think it's. And I'm like, it's a vampire movie. They're like, get out of here. No, it's not. So like, because they see, most of the people think they see Michael B. Jordan with the Tommy gun, and they
Mhm.
think it's like an action movie.
They just think it's an
They
action
think it's
gangster
just an action movie.
Yeah,
Like, there's nothing on the posters that are of just the single shot poster of him that's at
that's
the
true.
theater.
Yeah.
It's just him with the gun, and he's, like, kind of at the end of the film,
Mhm.
and you're like, okay, well, I think you're right. I think the movie kind of forgets that, but I think that that's kind of great at times. And
At times,
and
yeah.
I do think it rushes on itself, but I do also think that it's going to play better now knowing what this movie is on rewatch, and then you'll be
Mhm.
able to comfortably be able to go, like, back, like, because I think the same thing happened with Nope for me, and I don't know how high you are on Nope or not, but
It's my least favorite Jordan Peele movie.
see, for me, it's the best, because there's more and more and more that I find, and I think that movie forgets that it's an alien abduction film. That's right. At
Yeah.
times, it forgets that too, and it's like, that's the hook to get you in, but actually, we're telling a different story. And I actually kind of find that cool. And that subversion by these filmmakers that are using genre to get people in, but actually make them think. Yeah, we don't get to see movies like that. People would just make it
No.
a vampire movie for the 2 hour runtime.
I mean,
And
like the fact that this is a like period gangster vampire musical. Like
yeah,
these are all genres that I love, or to different degrees. But like I can't, don't think anyone has mashed these exact genres up before.
yeah.
But yet the movie that I was thinking of most while watching this after From Dusk Till Dawn for obvious reasons was weirdly enough The Brutalist,
Really? Oh,
because that ending, what Jack O'Connell is talking about and stealing all these people from outside, it just reeked of, okay, that you are very anti-cultural appropriation
yep.
and very anti-assimilation,
Yes.
like it. And you can see that, like how these are just very nice people, nice southern comfort kind of people. We just want to sing with you. We got money to
And they're playing
spend
like
and
these Irish
want to play this
jigs and
really
everything.
nice music for y'all.
But then
And
we've got something else to, and it's also too like
can't
the
we all just be family? Aren't we all
exact
family?
the
Like,
little the money that they have, old money,
right, the
old ancient
gold
money.
coins.
The
Yeah.
like from like the gold rush. The
Hmm.
idea of like this is money that we found a long time ago, and we've been
Hoarding.
we've been hoarding it, but these ideas have been there since long before we even found this,
Yeah.
and we're going to keep doing it at this high rate, this really sinister, nasty rate. And I do think he's phenomenal. And it also was just like a movie. I was like, where has he been, Jack O'Connell? Because like
Yeah,
he's
truly.
a great actor, and
He's
I
kind of
was
had his thunder stolen from him a bit in with all the Paul Mescals and
yeah, he
the
was like the original
people.
guy. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah.
And I want to say this too. I thought, and we haven't mentioned her, but Haley Steinfeld, I thought was incredible as well in the film too.
As
And
brilliant casting as Jennifer Beals was in Devil in a Blue Dress,
yes,
like really using their history to
using
say
yeah,
something in the
using
character.
her
Hmm.
like history and
Hmm.
listening to interviews with her and Coogler talk about those very necessary conversations she needed to have about her own life and
Hmm.
injecting that into the film like that again it provides that authenticity and honesty that and attention to detail that movies out there just don't do. And it
Yeah.
continues to show that he had a purpose from the beginning, from casting to location to shooting. It's a pretty fascinating, special little film. And it's not little at all because it's a blockbuster and it's like a 90 to $100 million film. I think Dan and I can recommend it. Please go see this.
Wholeheartedly.
See this. Honestly, see this as many times as you can. We need a movie like this to succeed just as much as an independent film because it weirdly does feel like it's got an independent soul inside of it. It's not the usual like it's not a Minecraft movie. So you
No,
know what I
this
mean?
is a
Like
movie
this
that
is
came
with
from the
care.
heart and soul of an
Yeah.
artist,
Yep.
truly. And like, even if you may have issues with it, the fact that we are seeing this vision and that he got so much of that vision on screen exactly the way he wanted to, and it's as entertaining as it is, like, come on, some shit like this doesn't come around every day.
Exactly. Sinners is in theaters right now. Okay, Dan. Well, best horror films of the century so far. So
Well, I feel like we gotta start with Get Out because I feel like that kind of no, I mean like that
yeah,
really just kind of set horror on a entirely new track in the late 2010s. It opened up, I think, a whole new language for horror movies to speak that it had been doing, but not for a little while.
I think Get
Like
Out. Yeah.
all horror movies are also about society,
Mhm.
you know, but I think that none of them really started embracing that as wholeheartedly as they do now
Mhm.
until Get Out.
I think that Get Out is the like inflection point of when we started to take horror seriously and audiences started to really pay more attention to horror films. Not that they weren't before, but in terms of
Mhm.
actually looking and deeply thinking about horror films and what they mean. Because I think the 2000s, the 2000 to 2010
Mhm.
is a rough era. There's some good films in there.
The
You got
torture porn.
the torture
Oh,
porn, the
Lord.
blood and gore, the slasher
Mhm.
film. And I think in about 2012, I believe it was, Cabin in the Woods comes out. And that
Mhm.
examines that movie. That movie examines the genre and says, we need a full reset. We got to blow this whole thing up. That's literally the point of that ending. I think it's brilliant. I think that that movie is a brilliant movie in terms of having something to say and being absolutely right. It's very funny. Drew Goddard did a fantastic job with it. I know that some people don't like it,
Mhm.
but I actually think like
I love it.
it's a necessary bomb to a franchise, to like a genre that needed
Genre.
to wake up, be shaken, and said, "You are a joke."
Mhm.
And some
And it's
people have.
so entertaining.
It's
My
so
God.
entertaining, very funny, very shocking and horror. And using every
Mhm.
trope and every cliche to wrap itself up into this climactic finale that is just like, yeah, the whole thing sucks. And I think that from that moment, directors and visionaries started taking themselves maybe a little too seriously, but definitely started
Yeah.
reinventing what they could do with this genre. And that's where I think the A24, the neon, the independent, the indie horror film, right, started formed. And then
Yeah.
the studios started actually we started seeing genre auteur directors come from this. And that's where Peele comes in, which I think Peele along with James Wan are the most
Yes.
important horror directors of the last 25 years.
Hmm.
For me, like I think what Wan did with Insidious, what he did with Conjuring,
Conjuring. Yeah.
Malignant, these are films
I mean, The
that
Conjuring becoming
giant
a
franchise.
franchise,
Yeah,
like, and it's not a horror franchise that doesn't have a serial killer involved, like that's unheard of.
it really is. And then like Peele is an entity within himself. He's
Mhm.
like horror Spielberg. He can make anything at this point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it flops or it's a big hit. Most of them have been pretty decent hits. He attaches his name to something and people go and see it. The trailer for him is playing in front of Sinners, and people are like,
Hmm.
I got a text from Jay this week, literally when he saw the trailer and goes, "That's one of my now most anticipated films of the year because it looks so different and so original." Whether you like Candyman or not, like people went and saw that movie because not because of Nia DaCosta, sadly, because they saw Jordan Peele's name and
Yeah.
that excellent marketing that go with Monkey Paw. Probably the other person that gets a lot of big credit as well during this time period is Jason Blum as a producer. Like
Mhm.
Blumhouse, the $5 million horror film, but and Blum is connected to James Wan, he's connected to Peele, and all three of them sort of really do a fantastic job at making their movies be entertaining films. And Peele's from Get Out to Us to Nope, regardless of which ones you love the most, they're the most talked about, sought after, you know, in horror films of the last 10 years, 15 years. And
Mhm.
now we're in a run where some of the biggest films of the year are now horror films. I mentioned it.
Yeah.
The Substance and Nosferatu last year are perfect examples of these films that speak about something culturally,
Yeah.
and then they also reinvent things that we've seen before, but they do it through the lens of these voices. Like another person that I think, which Dan, you and I, not to humble brag, we're going to see her third film. Another voice that I thought we're going to see it at Cannes, Julia Ducournau. Raw and
Yes.
Titane are
Oh
these,
my God.
talk about singular, authentic, wild,
Yeah.
um, terrifying, thought-provoking, introspective voices in horror
And pushing
using
the boundaries of what horror
exactly,
can be, even like
exactly.
Titane. I mean, outside of that one, I think it's one take scene near the beginning, and the car fucking stuff. It's a
Yeah, beyond
very
the car
like,
fucking stuff,
but
beyond
like
what makes it
outside,
unique.
like that is a really heady movie about ideas, about gender and identity, and it's a real psychological study, that movie, and yet it's also a pure out and out horror
Yeah,
movie. Yeah,
its
it
ideas on trans
completely
identity
incredible stuff.
are
In That has made it one of the most rewatchable films of the past few years for me. Like,
I was
there's
yeah.
always something new to think about whenever I see it.
I think another film from last year is up there as well too. Is I believe your favorite film of the year last year,
I
which
saw the
was
TV
I Saw the
glow.
TV Glow, which is
Hmm.
this very David
Yeah,
Lynchian esque horror. Uh, found almost feels like found footage at time.
it does at
Um,
times.
film about uh, trans identity and
Hmm.
being able to be one's authentic self or resisting it and regret. And I think horror has found that over the last couple of years. It's like, yeah, it could be. It's probably like a very sad genre, and it's been like
It
it
is.
can get
It
really sad, but it
is.
also can be very introspective for the filmmakers themselves. I mean, I was thinking also like another person that's made like a living off of this, outside of even Robert Eggers, like most of his film, like The Witch and Nosferatu,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, even The Lighthouse to a certain
Yeah.
degree, is Ari Aster. Like Aster
Yep, I
is
was gonna. That's the other big one. Like Hereditary, even though it wasn't like the first of that like elevated horror
the
thing, I think,
A24. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that really has its roots in uh the sort of one-two punch of the Babadook and It Follows, neither of
Yes.
which are even A24 movies, but the
No.
fact that they came out really kind of back to back and shared this very similar, we are very traditional horror movies, but clearly about like social issues that these demonic entities are we're gonna be really like just gonna lay it out there like this is a symbol for this thing, and you're gonna get it, and you're also gonna be super entertained
Also,
by it.
most of the films that we're talking about here, they're, you know, female led. You're talking
Mhm.
about
And
those
if
films.
not a female behind the camera, then
No,
a female
if you're in
protagonist.
the front of the camera.
Yeah,
I mean,
even if you don't have someone.
Hereditary and
Yeah.
Midsommar are
Yes.
those.
Yeah, and The
Hereditary,
Witch too.
The Witch too.
Anya Taylor-Joy.
I mean,
She's the lead
Hereditary
character. Mhm.
is a movie that,
Jesus Christ, it's so
I mean,
good.
how many times do you see Tony Collette in that clip and the fucking face on your face and which is
I
just
am
like
your
one,
mother.
I'm your mother. Before that was Fred Armisen. Now it's Tony Collette. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's why, Dan, do you think over the last couple of years the genre has connected with so many people? Because I feel like people, they go back to these films over and over
Mm,
again. They've reconnected with horror because it wasn't like that for a while, but now this is like people's, literally. I think the answer to it is probably it's because they find themselves in it and see an identity that they can attach
yeah.
themselves to. But I mean, these are movies that are like, people, when you do like the, not that it matters, but the letterbox four, these are
Mm,
movies that are brought up a ton,
yeah.
are these personal elevated horror films now.
And I think that that word personal is really the key, because I think the best horror movies of the past 2.5 decades have really been those that have directors and writers behind them who wrote something deeply personal,
Mhm.
and they put it all up on the screen, and they were able to externalize these very internal feelings. They were able to externalize depression and self-doubt and generational trauma in these, demons or horror-esque situations that people were able to latch onto because they got so many of those details right. I know I had a friend of mine who was a young mother, and she felt so seen by the Babadook about how, like, that is about, like, just having a child being almost a parasite on you and sucking all the joy and stuff out of your life while you're just dealing with the depression of being a person in the modern day society. I remember her just getting to have this really long conversation about that movie and how it so captured a lot of what she was feeling as a mother. I also thinking of a friend of mine who, and this movie was a huge surprise for me, but Smile,
Mm,
like, I have had another friend who was dealing with depression and PTSD and saw that movie, like, had to turn it off because it got too real for him. But there are these people have come up with these concepts that are really strong representation of things that I think we're all dealing with in our heads. And they're externalizing these feelings in really um, exciting ways.
for
You
sure.
know?
No, I totally agree. And I mean, um, for me, when I was looking through this, Dan, I was trying to go through the 2.5 decades that we've done this so far.
Mhm.
And a lot of the films in the 2010s were the ones that called to me and
Mhm.
really spoke to me more. I grew up watching some horror films and everything, but I think that, the reason why for me it's all clicked now is because we get to see these auteurs put their staple on these stories that we've heard or we've been told or seen for so many years. And I mean, there's a couple like that I go back to, that's still in there, in my pantheon of great horror films that I get to watch, which is, I get to watch films like 28 Days Later, which we get to see a franchise, kind of reboot over this summer, and can you see Drag Me to Hell from Raimi because Raimi
Oh,
is a
hell
guy,
yeah.
which is a movie that like but these are masters already of the craft or have built
Mhm.
or had something to say. A movie like American Psycho, which is being re-talked about right now
Yeah,
and
and being
and
remade.
and being
Oh God.
remade
Oh,
by honestly the only person that probably should be able to remake it, which is a gay man
probably, yeah.
and with Luca. I mean, he made Suspiria and Bones and All, which I find
Suspiria, fucking brilliant.
yeah,
Fucking
and I
brilliant.
loved Bones and All, and I think
Yeah,
that
good
that's
movie too.
and it's again I'm telling you, Luca and the sound design alone for his horror movies, like it'd be really great. But um, no, I mean, now I think of, you mentioned most of these films, but like, yeah, the Babadook or Midsommar or It Follows or or Raw, or I thought a Green Book or a Green Room, not
Green
Green Book,
Room,
yeah,
yes.
Green Room, which is
I
like
mean, Green Book also a horror movie, but in a
very
very different
horror for other
way.
reasons. The Green Room and Under the Skin,
Oh
these
God, Under the Skin.
which
Oh
terrified the
my
shit out of me when
God.
I first saw it because you just with Jonathan Glazer, he had such an immersive experience,
Mhm.
and the first time the Scarlett Johansson sort of alien creature consumes someone that in that black void, it's
Mm-mm.
terrifying.
Mm-mm.
And then like even like a call back to Randy in the Evil Dead remake, which is one of the
Yeah.
most gnarliest films, but it is fully
Ugh.
committed to making you shiver and be mean and and strip away the comedic elements of what make Raimi's classics so great. And then now it's like Nope and Barbarian which makes me very excited
Very,
for
yes.
for weapons
Weapons.
later this year, or um, even a movie. I'm going to tell you this: even a movie like Godzilla minus one terrified the shit out of me.
Godzilla minus one, so fucking good. Best Godzilla movie in ages.
Ages because I remember I was like, oh, why is everybody saying this is so scary? And then the sort of the atomic bomb metaphor, in a year where we had Oppenheimer, it's a very good call and
Yeah.
response movie to that.
Hmm.
And to watch that happen, it's the most terrifying depiction of Godzilla maybe ever,
Yeah.
because of the sound design and the effects and the against all on desperation of like the people there trying to survive.
Well, and
Um,
then also another big key in that movie that I think is a key to a lot of the horror movies that have worked so well in the past few years is real focus on character.
yes.
These aren't just disposable people that, the killers are slicing their way through. They really take their time, these filmmakers, to flesh out these characters and give us something you know, to cling to, something to really care about when these characters get killed. I think about X a lot.
Yeah.
Ty West. I love the whole trilogy with Pearl and Maxine, but X in particular, like, is almost like Sinners. Like, you spend a whole half of the movie just listen to these characters talk to each other and building relationships with them before it becomes a typical slasher movie in the second half, and suddenly it's very, very incredibly sad,
Hmm.
you know?
No, for sure. I mean, I was thinking about X2 because I mean, we got this like mini trilogy in the last 2 years or whatever,
Insane that that
and
happened. I still don't believe it.
they all feel very different,
Yes.
and yet they all tie together, and they all are an examination of the various films that we've talked about here, and different types of films that can be found in in the horror genre, but then also are completely authentically through the vision, not just of Ty West, but of Mia Goth, and her
Yeah.
being tied in every single one of these films to, I mean, like Pearl, I think is up there with
It's
Hereditary in
brilliant.
terms of the monologue that she's giving there. It's,
God.
but then, I think, I think that the iconic symbols of like the last couple of years, I think of her, I think of I'm a star.
Yeah, the
You know what I mean?
audition
Like in the
scene.
audition
Yeah.
scene, which is it's cringe and horrific in other ways too. I just remember watching that.
Yeah.
There's Dan, I'm going to ask you this, and then we'll sort of get out. If you had like a Mount Rushmore of a top, like a that are four films that sum up the last 25 years of horror, what would those be for you?
Okay. Um, okay. The Ring,
Yeah,
because J horror, K horror were
The
really huge,
Grudge, and
especially around the turn of the century.
yeah,
And uh, oh God, I keep on wanting to say Goran Vishnik, but that's the
no,
actor,
Gore
not
Verbinski.
Gore Verbinski.
Yeah,
Yeah, like what Gore Verbinski does at that movie, fucking incredible. And like that's another one, like sort
that
of
was.
early in the century, you really sort of, that was an elevated
Mhm.
horror picture. Like
And that
that's
was his
really
audition to then make
artsy.
the Pirates films
Yeah.
and everything, and
Yeah.
have a career after that in the Hollywood system. Yeah,
Yep. I think
To the Ring.
that's got to
Okay.
be up there. Um uh The Conjuring, because that's on top of just being an aesthetically flawless movie, kickstarted a whole new horror franchise with paranormal investigators as the lead characters. That's kind of awesome. And those movies have actually kept up a really good level of quality, at least for horror franchises, that I think is kind of impressive. Um,
It's tough, right? To only bring it down
it's
to four.
very, very tough. Um, I think after that, I think would have to be, it would have to be the Babadook,
Mm-hmm.
I think, because that really does feel like the one that sort of kicked off the whole elevated horror thing and the
Mm-hmm.
way it captured people's imaginations. Essie Davis's performance.
Mm-hmm.
These are all sort of like threads that you can track through all the films that came after that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then I think Get Out would
Mm-hmm.
be my fourth. That is another just like that's a movie that's just like perfect scene after perfect scene after perfect scene.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to the end and you're like, I surrender. The perfect movie. You win. You win, Jordan Peele. This movie, you get it. But I do want to, especially with like everything that is happening in the news cycle recently, and since she's in Sinners, Wunmi Masaku, watch His House.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
on Netflix, and Wunmi Masaku is in it. She's incredible, but about the immigrant experience and really, really good at fucking with your head. And I think that's a good movie for the current moment. Also, potentially, in some ways, is in conversation with Sinners in interesting ways, I think.
Yeah.
I do want to give a shout out to that one before we leave. But it wouldn't make my Mount Rushmore, but
I think mine would be the first Saw movie.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and I think a franchise we didn't talk about at all, but definitely kept the genre alive for just a little bit. And just an honorable mention. I wouldn't put it on my Mount Rushmore, but something like Paranormal Activity
Oh yeah,
was
yeah.
something that it was a
Found
craze.
footage. Yeah.
Found footage. It was a thing. It wasn't, and it made its way from the horror genre to like every sort of genre, like Chronicle. Remember
Mhm.
Chronicle, and that came out, and that
Yeah.
was like that
Yeah.
was because of I think
I remember
Paranormal
the
Activity and
yeah, I remember the fever pitch
mhm.
around Paranormal Activity
It was high.
that
It
came
was like
out.
the
Like, my
scariest thing
God.
ever. It was like
Yeah,
it
everybody.
was like the
Mhm.
rebirth of everything from Blair Witch,
Yeah.
and but I think Saw, because that spawned a franchise, it also just gave us James Wan on a mass level.
Yes, it did.
I think Cabin in the Woods. I think that
Mm.
movie is the like Get Out, an inflection point on just destroying everything. It's very honestly, it's like weirdly, it's like the Last Jedi for Star Wars. You know what I mean? Like for the horror genre, it's like we got to burn everything down, so start anew. I agree with you. I think the Babadook is like third in terms of the female led auteur Jennifer Kent, and a great filmmaker.
Mhm.
Auteur filmmaker films with something to say, female led performances. That thing you don't get us, you don't get
Hmm.
Ari
You don't get
Aster,
Hereditary.
you don't get
Yeah.
Hereditary, you don't get all these things.
You probably don't even get X.
You probably don't even get that. No, you're right. I think that was the thing that broke through. And then this one's tough. I think Get Out is the right answer. It's not my personal like favorite appeals,
Hmm.
but that winning Oscars and being like probably very close to winning Best Picture
Hmm.
is huge. I will say this: if there is a movie to put money on down the road to be influential, I think it's a movie like The Substance. I think people
Absolutely.
could not stop talking about that, and it's
No.
still being talked about. And I think Demi Moore's snub is going to help that. And I think
Oh yeah.
the mirror scene is one of those like put it in the canon of great
Yeah.
things as well too. And
I worry that we are going to get a lot
of
of pale imitations of
oh,
this
we already
movie
have one.
over the next
Oh, we
few
already have
years.
one. It
We
won a
literally have an almost carbon copy of it that I saw at TIFF last year.
we have a literal
Like,
carbon copy of it
yeah.
also that was at South by that won a prize this year.
Oh,
It's a
right. Ugly.
different film. Yeah, it was well not
Wait,
Ugly
what?
Stepsister. No,
Not
that was
Ugly
at
Stepsister.
I think
Yeah, that
that
was
was at
Sundance.
Sundance. I'm talking about Slanted. I can,
Oh,
yeah, which
haven't even
everybody can
heard of
look
that
that up.
one.
Dan, I'll tell you about that later. That movie
Okay.
is, yeah, it's not very good, but it was like, oh, okay. Like literally the Substance won Oscars the week before, and we're giving another prize. It was like, it was very like on the nose, but yes, those,
Oh
that's,
dear.
it's having its little promising young woman
Mm,
Sundance moment where it's like everything, every movie is being made like this and
yeah.
cheap, and because they're cheap to make and easy to make, you know what I mean, and connect to people.
Mhm.
Um, Dan, lastly, I'm just gonna ask you, we're 25 years of the genre.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite film that you would, if we, because we're gonna do a big project hopefully by the end of all this, and we're gonna
Mhm.
put up these 25 best films of the, based off genre and years and all this different stuff. Do you have a film that you would recommend everyone, or say that this is the film that you would champion as the best horror film of the last 25 years? Your per your
Ooh.
personal favorite horror film of the last 25 years.
Ooh. That's hard. Um, okay. I To get rid of anything that I've mentioned so far, I
Yeah.
want to keep it something else that I haven't mentioned because those are obvious. Those are all part of my favorites.
I mean, like if it's
Um,
something you mention and it's the truth,
I mean,
speak it now.
one of the ones that would definitely be in my consideration for my favorite is Luca's Suspiria.
Yeah.
That just for me is just so far beyond anything. It's really incredible. But the ah, you know what? I've been ride or die for this movie for the better part of the past 25 years. So I'm gonna stick with it. It is one of my favorite films ever.
Mm.
Uh, 2007's The Orphanage. J.A. Bayona,
All right.
incredible, like genuinely scary, also made me cry. Incredible performances, great cinematography. Um, and I think it's something that people are actually have kind of slept on, even at
Yeah.
the time, and certainly in the years since. But even there are others that I probably liked more since then. I feel like that's the one that I like most and is also the most underseen.
Hmm.
So I want to get that one on people's radar.
I'm gonna cheat
Uh-oh.
because
You're gonna
I'm
cheat.
gonna say five.
You fucker.
But it's a couple of films we haven't. It's a couple of films we haven't mentioned. So I would
Okay.
consider Let the Right One In, which we
I
haven't
that
mentioned.
was that was something that I was considering on my Mount Rushmore,
Yeah,
honestly.
that's a great
That's a
film
good
and
fucking
a great
movie.
remake too.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
The Others.
I fucking love the others so much.
That Criterion, by the way, one of the best restorations they've
Gorgeous.
had in a long time.
Gorgeous.
Um, I would consider Under the Skin. It's one of the best films of the
Ah,
last 15, 20 years.
yeah.
Um, Nope is big for me.
Hmm.
I think that might be in contention for the best of the decade so far, of the 2020s. And, you know, I'm going to say, and I'm going to agree with you. I think Lucas Suspiria should be up there in consideration as well too. I think that movie is so long.
Yeah, I mean, there
And
is that.
it's long, but it's so rich. And like I
Yes, my
never
God.
I never got I've always, when I come back to it, I'm like, how is this like this feels like an old um it's like an old gothic novel,
Mhm.
but
Yes.
but it's modern, it's bloody, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it feels like it also shouldn't exist, and it
It
probably shouldn't, because
it
it's
probably shouldn't.
remaking
Yeah.
this
One of the best horror
like
films
films
ever
ever,
made.
like
Yeah.
unremakeable film, right?
And yet it's completely separate. It is the same
Its own thing.
story essentially, but it
Yeah,
completely different. It could not be more different aesthetically, in terms of its focus, in terms of its performance styles.
yeah,
It works, and
yeah.
it works in conversation with the original. Yeah, it's
It
that
worked.
movie is fucking brilliant. Everyone who is not on that movie's wavelength, at the time was wrong.
And get out of here.
Completely, utterly
Also, one of the
wrong.
best horror scores you're ever going to hear from
Oh my
Tom
God.
York. Yeah.
Yes.
Should have won in like 2 Oscars, that and the song. And all
You
that.
know,
Just-
scores for horror movies have been going ham in the
Yeah.
2020s.
Good for
You got-
them. We
you got
should.
that one track from The Substance that you hear a million times. It's
Yeah,
so good.
exactly.
And of course, the Nosferatu score, the
Yeah.
Smile score,
Or-
which is just like metal things hitting each other randomly. It's fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's too much. There's too much. Well, Dan,
Mhm.
thank you so much for doing this with me, my friend.
It's
Can you
been
tell
fun.
everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dance and Dan on Film, and then you can follow my movie watching on Letterboxd and also Blue Sky at Dance and Dan.
You can
And of course, you can find my writing here on Awards Watch and also at Next Best Picture.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at awardswatch.com. If you like podcasts, like Dan already literally plugged, we have Director Watch. We're starting the Peter Jackson movie series, talking about Brain Dead this week, talking about horror film from Peter Jackson, a gnarly film if you've ever seen it. And iTunes, Spotify, 5-star reviews over on the website. Sign up for the newsletter. Next week, we will be back. We will be doing a summer movie preview episode. Very excited to do that with the crew. No box office draft this year. But we will talk about box office. We'll talk about everything in between. Maybe a little bit of state of cinema. Also, the big and small films that we're looking forward to in the summer. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.